I'm Alice in Ridgefield, Washington, and you're listening to Two Broads Talking Politics.
Are you listening?
Welcome back to a bonus episode of Two Broads Talking Politics. I am one of your hosts, Sophie, and as usual, I'm here with my co-host, Kelly. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, Sophie.
And joining us tonight is Brady Kriss. She's the founder and executive director of Ragtag. Welcome, Brady.
Thanks very much.
Can you just maybe start by telling us a little bit about Ragtag and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So at Ragtag, we organize tech volunteers to help out, basically donate their time and their expertise and their skills to progressive campaigns and nonprofits and activist organizations. So we try and help people. Basically, we help them get connected with organizations and causes they care about and find ways to contribute the skills that are particular to them in a way that's most helpful for those organizations. So the stuff that we do ranges from building apps to data projects to helping people set up Wi-Fi in a field office, basically any sort of tech thing that we can be helpful at.
What is your background? What were you doing before Ragtag?
Well, my way background, oddly enough, is in law. So once upon a time, I was an intellectual property attorney. And so this is, going a little bit farther back from your question. But so I was, practicing law, but I've been doing volunteer stuff for, political stuff in my area. Made calls for Hillary Clinton back in the day, made calls and did volunteer voter protection stuff for the 2008 elections. So went down to Florida and did poll watching and really enjoyed that stuff. But it wasn't really it didn't occur to me that it could be anything more than volunteering. And then in 2011, I actually had the chance to move out to Chicago and basically elbow my way into the Obama re-election campaign. So I showed up at HQ in Chicago and basically said, I can be here full time. Where do you want me? I started out there working in the call center, which was actually really amazing. Basically spending 6 or 8 hours a day answering the phone for, people who are calling in with questions or just wanted to talk or to complain about something or talk about how much they love the president or the first family or all of that stuff. So it was a really great way to both get a really good sense of the constituency, I guess, as well as to meet all the other volunteers that were there. So getting to hear their stories and where they come from and how they got there and all of that, and see the excitement they got when they got to talk to the constituents that were calling in. But the one thing I really did notice there was that people were having a lot of trouble with the tech we were using. So it was something as simple as they had laptops that had those little, I don't know if you remember on the ThinkPads, they had that little red nub that was like a mouse, but they also had a trackpad. So people they'd try and use that trackpad and the nub wouldn't work. And then they try and use the nub and the hand would touch the trackpad and the mouse was just going all over the place and nobody could enter in the information of the caller or any of that normal stuff. And I was just like, why don't we just buy them a mouse for everyone? And, eventually I did that, but we also we put a Post-it note over the trackpad so it didn't register when people accidentally touched it and things like that. So it was okay, it's not that the technology is too hard. It's that the expectations of the people who are trying to use it are not meeting up with the expectations of the people who designed it. So how do we take what we've got and in true campaign style, use duct tape and baling twine or Post-it notes or whatever you've got on hand. Sorry, that was a bit of a long-winded story for how I first, fell in love with volunteers and with organizers. But it leads right into the story of how I fell in love with building technology for volunteers and organizers. Because after a few months working on the team at the call center at OFA 2012, I actually jumped on over to the tech team and started working on some of the tools that they had there. So on the tech team, we were building tools to help the organizers out in the field primarily, and to help them, keep track of volunteers that came in, log their hours, do things like that. And it was really interesting to sit there right in the middle of the technologists and the field staff and the field volunteers, and see how their expectations were totally not meeting up, and to try and bridge that gap and explain to the volunteers how to use the tools that the devs had built, and explain to the devs the sort of situation around how the volunteers and the field staff were working. So teach them about the reality of working on a campaign out in like rural Iowa or something like that. And through that process of really just communication, building better tools to be more effective volunteers. So yeah, that really got me interested, and in that intersection of tech and organizing. And I tried to go back to law after the 2012 election, but it just wasn't doing it for me anymore. Come 2015, 2016, people started getting really interested in the Clinton campaign. And a lot of my friends were asking how they could get involved beyond just donating. And at that time I was living in California, where I still am. But a lot of Democrats here don't really know what to do. So they donate their money, they donate their money to local candidates and out-of-state candidates, but they want to give something more than that. And sometimes they have a hard time figuring that out. And particularly in the tech side of things, people have these really, really valuable skills, but they don't have anywhere to plug them in. So people started, my friends mostly, and sort of in my network, started asking me how they could volunteer for the Clinton campaign, and there wasn't an answer. So I started Tech for Hillary, and not too long after that rolled it into what became Dev Progress. So and now I'm getting really close to answering your question. And Dev Progress was a team of volunteers working with the Clinton campaign and the DNC to build tools for candidates up and down the ballot. It was a really good experience, but it became clear to me that it wasn't what I felt needed to exist. And so at some point over the summer of 2016, I decided that after the election, I was going to, take a little bit of time, chill out, rest up, go to the inauguration. It would be wonderful. And then I would start my new thing. That obviously didn't happen the way I wanted it to. And basically mid-November launched into Ragtag full force, because there was just so much energy, and it especially in the tech community, it needed a place to go. So that was an extremely long-winded way of saying that before I was doing Ragtag, I was doing a very similar thing with a different group, and have basically, in true tech fashion, iterated on that. And I think, have made it to something a little bit better. So
I like long-winded answers, so.
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about the kinds of projects then that you work on. I mean, the one that I am most familiar with when I heard Ragtag, what I think of is websites for candidates. I've seen various candidate websites that'll say like powered by Ragtag, but I know that there's a lot more that you work on. So what are some of the, kind of projects that you've been working on, ways that you've been harnessing volunteer energy?
Yeah, there are several different projects we've been working on. One is the websites, and we call it Web Squads. And the idea there is really just, some candidates are spending outrageous amounts of money on really simple websites that aren't mobile friendly or aren't accessible, or, are 2009 standards, and for people who are just steeped in technology all the time and who work in the tech industry, building a website with 4 or 5 pages is like an afternoon's work. So really, we're just taking that with the Web Squads project. We're building out very easy websites at a very achievable price point shall we say, for a lot of these really small campaigns. And that's been a really, really fun project for a lot of the volunteers. Another big project we've got going that I'm really excited about is called Campaign Helpdesk. This is coming back from a lot of my work on the Obama campaign, working on the Helpdesk, teaching people how to use tech tools and giving them a background to understanding how they work and why they work that way and how to make decisions about which tech to use and all of that stuff can be really, really helpful and can really make the difference between somebody using a tool that's actually going to amplify and magnify their work and them getting frustrated, giving up, and going back to clipboards and paper. Clipboards and paper don't crash. But so the Campaign Helpdesk tool or service, I guess, that we've got going right now is a place where any volunteer volunteering on any campaign across the country can go and see articles that the Ragtag volunteers have written up. We've got a couple of guest posts, things like that, all about the different technology that you might encounter while working on a campaign or volunteering on a campaign. We've also got the ability to write in a question. So if you go to your field office and somebody starts talking about Vote Builder, but you've never heard of Vote Builder, you can come to Campaign Helpdesk, search the article, see if you can find the word Vote Builder, and then you can learn what that means. And if you don't see it, you can write us a question. What is Vote Builder? And someone will get back to you. So it's really about leveraging the technology expertise and comfort and all of that of the Ragtag volunteers and getting that information out to other volunteers who are out in the field offices and doing virtual phone banks and that kind of stuff all over the country.
What is the makeup of your volunteer force? Are the people who volunteer with you primarily like developers, or do you have volunteers who work in other roles in tech? Like, for example, technical writers like me.
Yeah. So we have right now a little over 500 volunteers that have gone through our volunteer onboarding process, which includes an interview and filling out your tech skills survey and all of that kind of stuff. And the range of skills is actually super broad. I really think of it as like we're looking for volunteers who could work in a tech company in almost any role. So developers, front-end developers, back-end developers, database architects, data analysts, all of that a lot of people typically think about as like tech. But also HR. We need folks to manage the volunteers that are coming on board. We absolutely need writers. We absolutely need we need consumer facing writers for like the help desk articles, more technical writers for documentation. We need graphic designers, social strategists, like all sorts of things. And we've got folks who are coming primarily working in like the for-profit tech industry, but we have a solid contingent of folks who are either working in the nonprofit and political space or have backgrounds doing that on a volunteer basis.
So I was looking at some of the organizations that you've partnered with to do projects, and I noted a bunch of organizations that we have spoken to on the podcast. Awesome. And so, we do a lot with Indivisible, talk to a lot of people who are involved in Indivisible. We've interviewed Sister District, Project, and Spread the Vote. And so I was wondering about the kinds of partnerships that you've done, and, I think it's easy to envision ways that you help individual campaigns, but the way that you're helping some of these organizations as well that are involved in progressive projects.
Yeah, a lot of the ways we're helping organizations like that are like the decidedly, well, depending on your approach, sort of unglamorous type of projects. So when you build a website for somebody, or if you do an ad campaign for somebody, you've got all these like nice, shareable, shiny things that you can send out to all your friends or tweet about or whatever. But we really take an approach of like, okay, what can we do to help this organization that's doing good work on the ground with real people? What can we do to help them do that better? And so for a lot of organizations like Indivisible and Sister District and Spread the Vote and Run for Something and that kind of stuff, we have helped them with like little doodad integrations to get their CRMs to sync with their bulk mailer tool. Like little things where at one point they had somebody